sometimes we get stuck because we really want to fall on what we know.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is that what if there's an opportunity for us to discover that this detour is better?
Right.
Like this new path is actually going to give us something or show us something or allow us to become something that we haven't been yet or see something that we haven't seen yet. And
Of course. Okay, that
so
makes a lot of sense.
So I'm like always jumping on Amazon reading the reviews. Like, did I get a good review?
Are you really? Yeah. Still?
Yeah. Still.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get to a place where I can just be okay.
Yeah.
With it.
So if someone were to write a bad review, which I'm assuming you haven't heard one yet.
I haven't.
What do you think you would feel?
I think I would. It's funny because I've processed this question.
Have you? Of course.
I think I would feel it in waves. I think the first wave would be, I probably need to take this seriously and figure out how, what this is saying about, what I could have done differently or what I should do differently next time.
Yep.
The second wave would be something like, see, this is why I should never have written the book. I knew it. The third wave would be like, hater, why did you take you hate it that much that you had to take the time to write the doggone review?
And yeah,
and
exactly.
Give it a bad review. And then the final wave would be, I would go back and read the other positive reviews.
Yeah. To get like reaffirmed.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which exposes the struggle, right? It's like, I shouldn't be made any better about the positive reviews, and I shouldn't be made any worse by the negative reviews.
Okay, that's an interesting thing to bring up. There's why do we believe that in some ways those like what people say or think about us, even though we know deep down it's projection and it's not our stuff, it's theirs. Why shouldn't it affect us that way?
Because again, I think we've been conditioned. That's the way we've been conditioned to evaluate how we matter.
Yeah.
And so even when you know it, it's hard to break.
Yeah, that's so true.
Like I teach other people. I tell other people all the time, the only opinion about you that matters is yours and God's. Right?
Yeah.
You kind of know where God is on you.
Yeah.
Right? He sent a whole kid to die for you. So he kind of likes you.
Yeah. Okay. But as I discovered, and I talked about in like my first little go around with this episode, that I believed that, and I believed that God thought of me as bad, evil, like worthy of an eternity in hell.
Right.
So we don't necessarily know.
Isn't that crazy?
Yes.
Because we know that, but we don't feel like, because we still hold that, I'm not worthy. So I need information outside of myself.
Yeah.
To affirm whether I'm worthy or not.
Exactly. Right.
Because I have to be not worthy. I have to be inherently bad.
Right.
And so I think we're just conditioned and wired that way.
See, this is what, so I don't know how much of it is just how long it's been sort of in the water or in what we've passed down culturally or theologically. But, for me, where we go wrong is, the Genesis story, we mess up about, it's about creation somehow. I think it's about those two trees. Because we get to choose life or we get to choose judgment on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And what is the first thing that the humans judge? They judge they notice that they're naked, and not just that noticing it, they judge it as bad.
Yeah.
So at our most pure form, we're bad.
Yep.
And I think that to me is I don't know if that's a theology thing. I don't know if it's culture. I don't know what it is, but I think I carried that most of my life, that, God loves me, but maybe despite the fact that I'm bad or because I'm bad or something, there's always the bad part there.
Alan Hirsch wrote a book on this. It's called Reframation. And one of the things he talks about is how religion in the West always, it tends to start with shame.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
It starts with shame. So
Right.
I'm bad. I shouldn't let anybody see me.
Yeah.
So I got to do all these other things to cover myself up.
Right. Exactly.
And
That's
so, you
good.
know, the approval of people, the praise of people, they just
Yeah.
become leaves.
Yes. That's so
The
good.
number of cars that we have, or the job that we have, or how much money that we make, or the fact that I got 1,000 reviews on, 1,000 good reviews, and I'm a 4.9.
Who gave that less than 5?
I'm just saying, I actually haven't looked. I was gonna look tonight, but I haven't looked recently. But all those things become ways out of shame, and it's like
right.
the actual way out of shame is to not realize that you don't need a way out. Like you're okay.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Like you're okay, like right now.
Right.
And so
I think that's so true. I mean, your book about transition decisions is in the title, and one of the things that I think we moralize all the time is choices that we make. So it's either you made a good choice or you made a bad choice, and we judge choices when like in reality, I don't know if you could talk more about this. I know you do. Like they're just choices. They're choices that we make, and there are outcomes to choices. And instead of moralizing every step along the way, maybe if we sat in I made a choice and lived with that rather than sat in regret, there might be some hope there.
Yeah, I mean, our choices are, and you kind of see the evolution of the book, right? So like right around you get to chapter 5, it's like it's almost like a plot twist. Like, oh, you mean that whatever choices I've made, they've been formative.
Right,
and
exactly.
So the issue is not so much am I good or am I bad? Am I better or am I worse for the choices that I've made?
Right.
The issue is like, who am I?
Yeah, that's so good. Yep.
Like, so who have I become?
Right.
And whoever I've become, I'm okay. If I'm breathing, I'm okay.
Right. Yeah.
It's okay. Like I'm okay. Like I'm
Yeah.
okay. So yeah. So there's because there's so much pressure and tension and stress about the outcomes of our choices, because we think that the outcomes of those choices are really going to make a statement at the end of the day about whether or not we are good or bad. I mean, this is a good or evil. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
And the thing is that at some point we have to recognize that our choices simply give us the opportunity to more fully show up.
Yeah, that's good. There's a story you tell about when you were going back to Indiana Wesleyan, and like you knew the route, but you put in the GPS and that whole thing changed. The question that you ask at the end of it is, how much time do we waste traveling the road that seems right to us? And I feel like I can resonate with that thought a lot. Like, talk a little bit more about that. Do you feel like that can connect to all sorts of things? Like it can connect to personal relationships, spirituality. I don't know.
It connects to everything. It connects to everything. We feel like there's more security in traveling the road that we know.
Right.
And that connects to everything.
Right.
But the thing is that life don't care what you know. I mean, and so life will give you detours, and life will give you, oh, this road is closed.
Right.
And life will give you, oh, this road goes through the city that you used to like to stop in.
Right.
And life gives you that. And sometimes we get stuck because we really want to fall on what we know. And the problem is that what if there's an opportunity for us to discover that this detour is better? Right. Like this new path is actually going to give us something or show us something or allow us to become something that we haven't been yet or see something that we haven't seen yet. And I made the assumption that the way I knew was better, and it created a delay for me experiencing what I was going to experience. And not only that, I robbed myself of the opportunity to see things I'd never seen on that new route.
Yeah, right. Okay. This leads me to can we talk about white people for a second then? Because
Yeah.
all right. So
If you say so, white brother.
Right. Yeah. So what we do now, I can speak from, we learned a history in this country.
Yep.
So we learned what we believe to be a guiding principle, true. It's like the best country, the freest country.
Yep.
All of those things. And then at some point, I guess, I could say for me that got disrupted, and it was painful and confusing. And I got upset and angry and shame filled and all this sort of stuff.
Yep.
I know that you have been in a lot of white spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you've had to speak to a lot of majority white spaces. I've been in those places where you've been doing that. Like, have you noticed this frequently? And what have you noticed? I mean, is there like a breakthrough? Is there something that you notice that connects? Because people are coming to you into these conversations with all of that assumption, all that what they know. And you're telling them that what they know may not be fully the truth. Mm-hmm. So like, what is some experiences there? What does that bring up for you?
It's like I'm in some conversations in some of those spaces. I'm like Morpheus.
Yeah. Right. And so you're giving people
what you think is true is not.
And then you
offer you this red pill. This is gonna sound funny, but I this is a true observation. It's, for me at least, it's got to be hard to be a white person right now. It's just got to be hard to be white right now. I mean, because, and here's why I say that. Because the whole system of whiteness has worked for so long for the white person.
Right.
So they think, right? It's the whole matrix thing. I mean, truthfully. And so it's given you not just a way of knowing, right? Not just a path.
Yeah.
But an identity.
Yeah, exactly.
And so for a lot of people, what they're being presented is not just, I have to take a new route, but I have to deconstruct my personhood, my way of being in the world. And so what I find is that when I'm in those spaces, having those conversations, I very much do encounter three groups of people. Faithfully. The first group that's, nope, I know the route, I'm going to take my route, and they're going to double down on the path.
Yeah. Wow.
The second group is, they're not going anywhere because they're too busy trying to start a fight with me.
Wow. Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't have to fight you over this. You could go with the first group if you want to. That's your choice, right?
Yeah.
No, this can't be. And those are the good people who just cannot emotionally or mentally process what's happening in the world right now.
Right.
Like, those are the people who are feverishly trying to, take certain textbooks out of schools and feverishly trying to rewrite laws, and because they're trying to fight to protect the world that they know.
Exactly.
And then there's another group of people that are saying, you know what? And this is a smaller group, but there are groups that say, you know what? I've never really felt comfortable on this road. You mean to tell me there's a detour?
Yeah, that's good. That's really good.
That seems scary. That seems different. That seems new. But I've never felt right on this road. And then there's some people who are further down that road than others.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think you have a unique set of challenges that you've encountered because of the position that you've been in and that I've witnessed you in. And and being the kind of person that you are, I imagine you've had to comfort a lot of white people in their repentance or moves away from whiteness. That's just my guess. Um, I maybe including myself at times, because I know that there are times when we want it to be right. We want to like act like we don't need a GPS at all. Like we don't need to be coached along or brought along or discipled or whatever your language is in a journey that you're not familiar with. And so I know that that's something that I've done to be the good white guy, that I've just pretended or acted like or assumed like I knew what was expected or what the right answer was. And that's a unique set of challenges I imagine you confront as well. Yeah.
I mean, because again, everybody has a different way that they have to unpack to get on that path, right? And so I feel better about when the first group, those folks who are just committed to, I feel better when they just identify themselves that way. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Let's go our separate ways.
You know what to deal with there, right?
Yeah, I know what I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
The second group, I've decided I cannot be responsible for, it's kind of like when your child has a tantrum. And, the absolute worst thing you can do is sit there and feed the tantrum. You're like, I'm sorry you're having a hard time. I'll come back, I'll check on you later. I cannot take responsibility for your emotional response.
Right.
I find myself with a lot of grace for that third group because I feel like this is part of my purpose and reason for being. It gives me joy. I feel like part of mine is to help people who are trying to explore new paths. And so when someone says to me, I'm committed to going down this new path, but I'm scared, or I need help, or what should I do, or how would you advise me, or can you mentor? Yeah, I'm willing to take that, road with somebody until they show me, they're inauthentic or, they really don't mean it. But if their heart is really on that path, I'm there for everybody, because that's kind of what I feel like I'm that guide, that kind of person to help folks along that way. So
the wise one.
So you say.
I do. Yeah, that's my experience, at least. And I've experienced seeing you go from preparing to speak to these crowds and what it does to you, because I know that that's been a challenge, to delivering these things. And then getting to see that process is something. So the newest thing you're working on is around recovery, but it's through the Manifest Network that you are co-founder of.
With my wife.
Yes. So I feel like what you touch on a lot is just bringing people through difficult times. But what was it specifically around? Was it around the pandemic? Was it around seeing what's been going on in the country? What are some of the things that made you feel like this is the time to talk about recovery and how you got that kicked off? What was going on there?
No, that's a great question. And you just helped me realize something about myself. Thank you. Because honestly, there are times when I ask myself the question, why do I have anything to do with these white folks who are, trying to bear fruits worthy of repentance, when it comes to racism and injustice? And you just helped me make sense of that in the context of what I feel like is my deeper call, which is transition. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
You just helped me name a stream. Thank you.
Beautiful.
But what happened with that, and it was really interesting. So, one of the things I talk about in the book is how I hear God, right? Like the heavens don't open for me. I don't hear this big voice that goes, "Shaun, this is the Lord." It's often interruptions of my train of thought that make me feel loved, comforted, smarter than I did 5 minutes ago. And so I have this compelling sense that right at the end of 2019, that we needed to create a space for people to gather on a monthly basis. For people who are just in transition, trying to figure themselves out, trying to figure life out, trying to figure career out. We start doing that. And then, of course, March 2020, the whole world, shuts down. And we move that into a virtual space. And then we start finding people showing up because one of the things that happened at the start of the pandemic when everything went virtual was geographies were crossed, right? So
right.
People, we were reaching people in Chicago, and all of a sudden they start coming from everywhere. And then we're just living life together virtually, and all of the things happened, right? From George Floyd to pandemic to that dude they said was president for a minute, and and people dying and loss, and some people struggling financially while a very small few did quite well, right?
Yep.
And it was all just a mess. And it was hell, and it was hard. And so a few months back, I'm thinking about this, like, so what does manifest do going into 2022? And I'm not feeling all the rhetoric, like, come on, let's start the year strong, let's come out of this pandemic strong. I'm like, ugh, it just feels nasty, dirty. I feel icky. Like, that doesn't feel right. Like, I feel like people are still grieving people that have died to COVID. I feel like people are still trying to pick up the pieces of their life. I feel like this is literally one of the darkest, loneliest moments that people have had to experience. And who is making space for Christians, not Christians? Who's making space for people to just catch their breath again? Who's making space for people to contend with all the feelings that they've been feeling? Who's making space for people to figure out, like, what is do I even go back to some things I did before? Like, and just like, what's the word that is like the rallying that says, this is a safe space for you to come in and recover. Recover. And so I'm like, okay, so let's have some honest conversation about some of the stuff that we're recovering from. And let me just offer some things that I've learned in my journey, and I'm still learning, to just give people the room to breathe, to get mentally, emotionally, financially back into it.
Okay. That's really huge. And I think that's right on and consistent with, I think, what I've experienced from you and discernment and wisdom, and trying to figure out what's actually needed right now, instead of what are the voices saying that like would make the most sense. What's the sex, but it brings up a question for me. And as somebody who struggled with this, I wonder how you feel about what your position as a leader in a lot of different spaces. So like you started a consulting business, you're an author, you're a pastor. Are there limitations like natural to the fact that you're a public figure in that way, in terms of your the way that you have to show up in those spaces, or the way that you can connect with people? Do you feel those limitations? Is it one of those things that you're able to have like a good set of boundaries within yourself around? I know for me, that was something that never stuck. So what does that look like for you?
No, that's a really good question. I think one of the things that we talked about is, well, two things. I think, and this too, there's such a temptation in a space like this to be like the hero. I am the savior of all of you people in recovery, and come unto me, all you that labor.
Which I have to say, no one would say about you. That's
right. No, but seriously, I mean, because when people show up into a space like that, and they're like, oh, and they send you messages, oh, this is so refreshing, please don't stop, please. Right. From the very jump, you're like, okay, all right. So number one, I'm not a therapist. Number two, I don't have all the answers. And number three, we got to really start thinking about how this community of people who are gathering in the space could actually be more helpful to each other than I could ever be to me. So it's funny that you bring this up, because one of the things we just talked about is, you know, in a couple of sessions, we're going to begin to create groups so people can interact with each other.
Nice. Yes.
Right. Because there's stuff that I haven't been through that I can't speak to. And there's limitations of what I know about some of the things we talk about. Right. So I can talk about trauma from a sociological, from a theological perspective. I don't feel good about crossing the boundary of talking about that from a, you know, psychiatric perspective, or,
right,
you know, or a clinical perspective deeply, right?
Yeah.
And so making it, you know, where I name those boundaries and we name those boundaries, but then we also create a space for people to know that those resources are available to them, right?
Man, I think that's huge, because ultimately I think a lot of people are coming out of this time looking for someone to lead them. And what you're saying is you have it within you. This reminds me of something that you told me. Can I quickly share that story? All right. I will, but I just want to say, like, it reminds people that you have this. You don't need me. I'm giving you tools that are useful, that I've learned, and you do that so well. You synthesize them and make them easy to digest. But I think the gift that I am so consistently hearing you give is that you have everything you need.
Yeah.
And I remember, so I went to a church planters training, and this is where you and I really bonded. That was in Minnesota, right?
That was in Minnesota.
Some of the best food I've ever had at a conference center or anything.
That seafood chowder. That's all I miss.
That might be why we bonded, because there was.
Yep. Food and space, man, does it all.
But I just remember really struggling that week with feelings of inadequacy, and also feeling like I didn't fit the mold of, like, you need to do this thing, it needs to be a business, it needs to be run this way. I didn't like any of it. But you were a consistent voice throughout the week of pushing me towards, like, but you have a unique thing. And then at the very end, we have this service, and I'm just not doing. I'm crying. I come back to my seat.
Which, by the way, I had been to dozens of church plant trainings, and nothing like that has ever happened.
Wow, for real?
So that was unique to that one. That stuff never happens. It was an amazing time.
Really?
Yep.
Okay.
That space was never there before. Just so you know.
Oh wow, that gives me something more to think about then.
Yep.
But I'm coming back to my seat after, like, just struggling with all this stuff, and this guy, Shaun Marshall, grabs me in a bear hug and just starts saying, you have all that you need. You just repeated it over and over, and I'm just bawling in this man's shoulder. And for me, I think that's the message right now that a lot of people may not realize is still true. You know, like, we always, one of the things that made America look to a strong, in quotes, leader like Donald Trump in 2016 was fear, uncertainty, when we have what we need. And strong, you know, demagogues like that will seize the moment. That's not what you're doing. And I think that's really huge, you know?
Absolutely. And I figured this out about myself. That's so affirming that you'd say that. And I'm gonna tell you why. Because I figured out my strongest gift is not teaching, it's not writing. I believe my strongest gift is convening. It is creating a space, or offering people space for them to recognize the goodness that's already among them.
That's so good.
I don't like I preached a message you heard me preach back in February 2020, and after that message, I had to leave the room, because it wasn't because I knew there were people in the room who disagreed with what I said, but I also knew there were people who wanted to praise me for what I said.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I had to leave the room because I'm not the object of this moment. Like,
that's good.
I don't need to hear criticism. I don't need to hear praise. Like, I'm leaving you with this, and I'm gone. So Like the best thing in the world that could ever happen for me is when I come in and do my thing, and then people forget about me because now they're experiencing the goodness that's in the room.
That's so good.
And so that's affirming for me, because I think what we've seen happen so many different times is people take advantage of those kind of spaces and then take people to them. And then at some point, inevitably, you, with your limitations, you're going to disappoint.
Well, I think that's really spot on to my experience too, that part of the issue with when you're not clear about those gifts, right? That you're there to create a space. And ultimately what I want this whole thing to be about is community building. We need desperately more than ever. We need each other in a lot of ways. And I think when I think back to times when I was struggling and pastoring, I realized that one of the reasons people couldn't show up for me for the way that I thought that I needed them to in spaces where I was being vulnerable as a pastor was that they needed me. Like I had set up, whether I, as much as I tried not to, as much as I tried to do the opposite of that, they needed me. And I didn't know how to navigate that sometimes. And I got hurt when people wouldn't reach out after I'd share something difficult. And ultimately that was it's something that I learn now. I would navigate differently in a space like that. You know, I needed them, and I was needing them in a way that I probably wasn't going to get. And so there's a lot there, but ultimately what I think is true when you're a leader, what I consider to be a good leader, you're going to be convening and empowering people to know that you're there to like sort of facilitate a space and create that environment where people can connect and build, you know?
And that's I want to say that's a very recent discovery. Like I pastored a church, and it wasn't until after a year that I pastored that I realized that I was pastoring them so that I could make them what I needed. And I didn't have an active awareness of that.
Well,
that came later.
I mean, I think that's true so often, right? That
yeah. But and me too, frustrated and angry and not really knowing why. And I think anytime we function beyond our actual station, we frustrate ourselves,
right?
Because the expectations that we're holding, they can't be filled in that way. And it's not that our needs are like wrong or that our needs are invalid, because then that's the other lie that you have to fight with. Well, if you go to the other stream, it's like, well, I shouldn't have any needs. I need to watch this. I need to die to myself. And it's like, that's not quite what I meant, but you know.
One of the most life-giving things to me has been a recognition that I do have needs, that they're real, and just figuring out how to get them met, those needs met in ways that feel healthy to me. It's just acknowledging those needs exist, and then you can process in a way that makes sense to you to get those met. I wasn't aware of those needs, and it's true. I was always like, you know, depending on whatever it was like, I can't show up fully in this space. You name the space. I can't show up because Jesus would have me lay down my life in all places.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that is so dangerous. And and one of the things that we know to be true is that every human being, because we have those needs, we're bringing them in every space that we exist. And so if a pastor is up there getting their need for attention met, or whatever that need is, and not aware of it, I think that's the key.
That's the key.
You know, and I think if we could be taught a little bit more about needs, and we get personality types and we get some other, but like we get needs met from these jobs. And I think it's important to know them, and we're not worse because we have those needs. We're not less worthy or whatever the language is, you know.
It's when we don't know, and then we don't know the ways in which we're functioning and the ways in which we're enabling a function on the other end,
Mm,
right? So there's a co-enabling that then can happen.
right.
But when you know and you can go into it conscious and you can negotiate boundaries around those things, it's like I said, I mean, it's not, I think the worst thing, and I'm speaking specifically about Christians here,
Mm.
the worst thing that Christians have done is that um, we have somehow destroyed the humanity of Jesus.
Mm.
Like we make Jesus like not this person with feelings and needs, and then we go trying to emulate this person who's not relatable to anyone,
Right.
right? And this is a dude who just had all these human realities. And so
Mm.
I think what I am rediscovering is the human Jesus.
That's so good. That's so
And
good.
and the fact that I can be, if I'm gonna be like him, if I'm gonna do this, then I can be human too.
I love
And
that.
you know,
I love
so,
that, Shaun. It makes me, I don't know why it makes me think of this, but I remember hearing about this concept, maybe it was from my therapist, of learned helplessness. Like
mm-hmm.
there was this like a dog that they were doing this thing with where there were four corners, and
Mm-hmm.
each corner that it would go to, they would shock it, right? And then they go to the dog went to the middle, and of course they shocked it again. And the dog then was just like, all right, I'm done. I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, like maybe it was just the phrase learned helplessness came up for me, because I think because we've made Jesus so out of reach
Yes.
within the Christian world,
Yep.
like we're just like, well, life is kind of just, this life is
Right.
hopeless.
Right.
And so I got to hold on to heaven or
Yeah.
to some
Yeah.
afterlife.
Yeah.
So it doesn't.
Come glad morning, when this life is over, I'll fly away.
I love
Yeah.
that you. Yeah. So I think that what it does is it doesn't invite you into active participation
Right.
of changing the world
Right.
around you. It invites you
Right.
into, okay,
Right.
I'll just sing a song to my boyfriend in the sky, and
Right.
then we'll just keep going.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because if we're just looking at a divine Jesus, then he's just here to take us out of the world. But like
Yeah.
the reality is, a human Jesus would be pissed about
Right.
George Floyd. A
Exactly.
human Jesus would be pissed as hell about some of the stuff that's happening. Would be pissed that people made billions and billions of dollars as children starve.
Mm-hmm.
Would cry if
Mm.
your loved one died of COVID-19.
Right.
Wouldn't be like, why can't I wear my mask? Why do I have to wear a mask? Why do I have to wear a mask? My body, my choice. He'd be like, don't y'all see? Like
Yeah.
people are dying. Like,
right.
why? What's wrong with you? What the hell's wrong with you? And so, I'm trying to recapture that.
That's good. But
And
yeah, I think when you're able to, the truth is, if you're learning about Jesus as a 21st century anything, you likely are going to need to do a lot of work digging.
right. That's right.
Like
That's right.
because far too often we've seen images of him that look like a guy that maybe has a nice beard, beautiful
Mm-mm.
blue eyes. You name the
Mm-mm.
image, it doesn't look like a first century Jew.
Mm-mm.
And so forget the images. He also did a bunch of things that we
Right.
can't possibly know. And I feel like that place of humility and unknowing is so important in the world that we live in today, in order to move past some of this this thing like back and forth, Fox News, CNN, left wing or right wing thing. It's like, it doesn't make any real sense to the human experience.
That's right.
And it certainly doesn't connect at all with the Jesus that you and I are like interested in learning about.
That's right. That's right. And that unknowing is faith. And we don't know anything about it.
There it is.
We lean so much and so heavily all the time on what we know, because that gives us security.
That's so good. Yeah, I feel like well, one of the things too is you got to bring faith into the conversation. That faith in the scriptures means allegiance or trust, right? And the fact that we have turned faith into belief, it's about a belief system. Instead of like, then you're secure in this thing. But really all belief does is neuter you in a sense. Like it turns you into, I think, like, you're sort of stagnant, and you're able to then, like, oh, that thing lines up with this thing, so I must fall in with that crowd. And ultimately what faith does, it puts you in this, like, all right, I'm just going to trust that I don't know all the answers.
Right.
Belief makes you think you have all the answers, which ultimately, as a finite being, you can't. Right. But so much of what's happening right now is a confrontation with, this is what I know, and because I know this, you must be wrong, and your value as a human being must not,
that's it,
be as valid as mine.
That's it. That's where it gets real messed up.
Yeah,
because now you don't believe what I believe, and so now you're somehow less than me.
Right, exactly. And that less than thing is so pervasive. And I think mostly people are tired of it, except maybe for some truckers in Canada. But I think, like, mostly people are tired of it. And ultimately, that's what I have always experienced. Like, you trying to create is a community of people that sort of know how they can generate beauty and life and bring, like, their fullest self to the party, rather than having to hide something. I think you have brought that out of me in a major way. And I'm excited to see where Manifest goes, where your next book goes. Are you working on one?
Transformation Decisions.
All right.
Transformation Decisions. Changing the things that change everything. Yep, that's the next one.
When's that coming out?
I'm walking by faith. I don't know. Probably that would make me laugh. Probably later this year, probably by fall.
Yep. Beautiful.
Yep.
Maybe you'll actually sign my copy of that, because I don't have the sign.
I know. I'm so bad. I'm so terrible.
We're not gonna have an end point like, and Shaun, thank you for joining me on this episode.
Thank you so much, Dave. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and thank the network.
We're really glad to have you, Shaun. This is